So I encourage creatives, especially young creatives, to go and do things. And I did that when I was young. I kayaked down a portion of the Mississippi River and hiked the Appalachian Trail and explored a fort that was sinking into the swamp in Louisiana. And all these experiences help form me to be the person that God made me to be and fill out all these details.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies in their diapers, welcome to the Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.
That's me, Tiberius.
And welcome to the Tiberius Show today. And I'm your host, Tiberius Boy. And as always, we're looking at various jobs and how they affect the world around us. Today's going to be very interesting. We're going to talk to a Chief Creative Officer. Do you have any idea what a Chief Creative Officer does? Well, neither do I. So let's talk to this guy and find out. Let me introduce our next guest, the one, the only, the amazing Brandon Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Tiberius. Thanks.
So, you are listed as a Chief Creative Officer. So, can you tell my listeners exactly what do you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I work for a company called Brainy Pixel Productions, and we're a Christian animation and production studio, primarily based out of North Alabama in the United States. And a Chief Creative Officer is kind of like the guy who comes up with all the ideas, all the concepts. I get to write all the stories and create the characters and the worlds for all the various shows and comics that our studio produces. Anytime we have a client who needs great ideas, I'm the guy that they call up. So a Chief Creative Officer is you get to be creative all the time, although I don't get to be creative as much as I like.
So what prompted your interest in wanting to work with animation?
That's a great question. I just kind of wandered into animation. Actually, I didn't really go to school for it. It's almost like God kind of laid that path out for me in advance. When I went to school for love, not money, I got my degree in English and I had a history minor. And this was way back when the dinosaurs ruled the earth, so I thought that being a poet was going to be a great idea. But when I was in college, some stuff started coming out called personal computers. And so I know that's really hard for you to understand, Tiberius, but there was a time before everyone had a computer on their hip or in their hand. And these things were brand new when I was in college. And I happened to have an affinity for them and had some knowledge about them, and very quickly learned that writing code paid more than writing poetry. And so I began a career in the computer information field and did software design and development for years. But I was always what I call a closet creative, where I was writing stories and creating worlds and drawing comic books and things of that nature on the side, hoping and dreaming one day to be a writer when I grew up. And God had it in store for me and my business partner much later in my career to start a company around a YouTube channel called Brainy Pixel. And the YouTube channel was called How to Draw and Paint. And it just was one of these early YouTube channels that caught fire. And so we built the company really around managing that YouTube channel, and it turned into an animation company. And so it was a pretty amazing ride. And I had learned through all those many years that being creative was what God called me to be. And so that's what I said, hey, I want to be the Chief Creative Officer when we started the company. And so that's how it happened. Kind of a crazy story.
Okay, so what type of animations do you make?
It's a great question. So we make all sorts of animations, both 2D and 3D, pretty much anything you can imagine, from very, very simple, like a logo animation, all the way to we're doing like visual effects and feature films now as well. So, which is also a form of animation, rotoscoping and things of that nature. So really a lot of the work that we do is based upon what our clients need us to do. About 80% of the work that we do is client-based service work. So they'll come with us with an idea and say, hey, I want you to bring this to life. And they have a specific budget. And we'll say, okay, well, we can do that in 2D. And it'll be X amount, or we can do it in 3D. It'll be Y amount. And they'll decide. And then we'll go off and create that. So if you go to check our website at brainypixel.com, you can see we do lots of different animation. We primarily started as a 3D animation house. That was what we really enjoyed doing to begin with, but now we're doing lots of 2D as well.
So how do you get your ideas of what to create?
Wow, that's a really tough question to answer. Um, so for me, I think any creative person, when they begin the process of creation, they're first going to go and look at their own experiences. And so I think being a person who seeks out new experiences and doing lots of cool things helps you have a lot of raw material when you get ready to go write a story or create a film or an animation. If you've never been anywhere and never seen anything and never done anything, it's really hard to kind of generate an idea of what something like that might be. So I encourage creatives, especially young creatives, to go and do things. And I did that when I was young. You know, I kayaked down a portion of the Mississippi River and hiked the Appalachian Trail and explored a fort that was sinking into the swamp in Louisiana. You know, and all these experiences help form me to be the person that God made me to be and fill out all these details. Meeting people as well is a great opportunity to get to understand characters, you know, and what makes people tick. Like you're obviously going to show up in a future show, Tiberius. You're definitely a character. So I'm going to have to write something based on meeting you. And also, I think reading a lot. I'm a big proponent of reading lots of books because all of that reading kind of, again, and it fills your brain up with the raw material of creating amazing stories and understanding stories and characters and how they interact into plots. So I think those three things are probably the biggest places where I get my ideas and where they all come together. And this is going to sound weird, Tiberius, so just prepare yourself. Is when I soak in the bathtub. I know that it sounds crazy, but I get the best ideas when I'm soaking in the bathtub. So there you go.
So what type of clients need animation?
Very, very good question. So for Brainy Pixel, we spend a lot of our time working in the Christian industry. And so large Christian organizations or ministries are often our clients. People like Focus on the Family or Answers in Genesis, Angel Studios, Lifestone Discipleship Ministries, folks who need either short animations or they need things made for curriculums. Like so, we do writing as well and lots of image creation and book layout, not just animation. But outside the Christian space, if you watch TV, you'll notice very, very quickly that lots of commercials are animated. And so the advertising space is a great place to sell your wares if you're an animator. One of the reasons is because it's easy for advertising companies to budget out animation because they never have to worry about the weather. When you're doing
Okay.
animation, you can control the weather, right? It doesn't, if you don't want it to rain, it doesn't rain. If you want it to be sunny, it's easy. You just move the sun into the set. So controlling stuff like that, controlling people's schedules becomes very, very easy when you're working in animation. So lots of advertisers will use animation, but also prior to our current job working at Brainy Pixel, my business partner worked in the defense industry and did lots of simulations for things like rocket launches or space shuttles or moon landers. And all that is just technical animation.
So
So it's
are you guys making the Tuttle Twins TV show?
We are not. We know those guys, and they're great friends of ours. But they're using 2D animation, some software called Harmony or Toon Boom, and doing a wonderful job of it. But we can do that sort of animation, but we're not making the Tuttle Twins. Great show though.
Okay, so what is the most fun part about being a chief creative officer?
I think for me, it's getting to do what I think God built me to do, and that's sit down at the keyboard and dream up new worlds. We're in the middle of working on a pitch right now where I'm creating a world from whole cloth. I get to create the places that the characters are going to go, the names of those places, the characters, what their backstories are, their histories, what they look like, and I think just all of that. That's something that really I've loved since I was in the fifth grade, and so for me, that's the most fun part of being a chief creative officer, the creation.
So what is one thing you think kids should know about being a chief creative officer?
Oh, it's hard to limit just to one thing, Tiberius. um, I would say practice, right? You can't become a chief creative officer just by having one idea or writing one story or one script or one book. You're going to have to do it a lot. It's similar to playing a musical instrument. We start when we're learning the piano and we start just learning the keys and where they are, right? And the names for the keys. And then we start learning our scales. And then we start learning how to put those scales together into chords. And then we have to
Mm.
practice those a lot until we get really good at them. And then when we're really good at them, then we can start learning songs. Then we practice those songs and we get really, really good at them. And then we can start putting songs together of our own and writing our own music and our own
Mm.
compositions. It's very similar as a creative officer. You got to write a lot. So you really got to love writing. You got to love rewriting. You got to love writing and writing and writing and doing some more until you get to the point where you're ready to be a chief creative officer. So don't fear the practice. Don't look at the practice like it's a bad thing. It's part of making you the type of creative officer that you want to be one day.
Well, here's like a good time to take a quick commercial break. Let's hear a word from our sponsors.
So you want to make an ad for your company, right?
Yeah, Tiberius, you want to help me?
Okay, so what's the name of the company?
PPWND.
PP what?
Professional Pressure Washing and Detailing.
So you like clean driveways?
Yeah, like that. We pressure wash commercial buildings and semi-truck and trailers.
So how would someone get a hold of you?
They can visit my site at ppwnd.com or call me at 407-900-7793.
So I just tell them to call you at 407-900-7793 or visit ppwnd.com?
Yeah, Tiberius, you got it.
Cut. That's a wrap. Just use that.
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
And we are back here talking with Brandon Hollingsworth. Brandon is the Chief Creative Officer at Brainy Pixel Productions. So, Brandon, can you describe like a typical workday?
Sure. I don't really have a typical work day, but but I'll give it a shot, Tiberius. I try to block my mornings off for creative endeavors like writing, whether it's a comic script or whether it's a movie script or curriculum that I'm working on for a customer, because typically in the mornings, my brain's a little fresher and I can kind of tackle those creative chores with a little bit more zest and zeal. Then I kind of have lunch with my wife, and then in the afternoon, I spend it in meetings typically or doing interviews like this. But then often I have to kind of shift gears and put on my other hat, which is the Chief Creative Officer hat at Brainy Pixel.
Okay, so how many hats do you have to be able to do in order to be an executive creative officer?
Well, typically in most businesses, small businesses, you wear lots of hats. And so for me, I wear an operations hat, which is where I kind of keep the bills paid, keep the invoices being sent, and kind of all of the paperworky stuff, emails and things of that nature. But then I also get to wear the Chief Creative Officer hat, which we've talked about a little bit. And then up until just recently, I was also like wearing our social media hat and also our business development hat. So again, that's part of running a small business. There's not a lot of people to do things, and all the jobs need to get done. So right now, I'm wearing about 4 hats, but hopefully soon I'm going to just be wearing 2.
So, what are some of the skills that your kids should be learning to be able to do your job?
That's a great question. So, I think one of the things is just building a good work ethic, right? That's something that is so critical, regardless of what your profession is, whether you're a police officer or a nurse or a chief creative officer or an animator, is just understanding that we're built to work. God made us to work. And that was something that he instilled in the garden before the fall. Work is not a bad thing. In fact, when people don't work, they feel useless. So understanding that we need to work and we need to work well, I think is first of all a great thing to do, build that work ethic. And then Follow kind of the way God has built you in terms of understanding what you're good at. Like, for instance, not everyone is good at running, a radio show, right? Not everyone can be a host. And so when you find that skill, lean into it and then practice, 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 get better at it, right? Continue to refine that skill. And honestly, I think if those two things, if someone comes to me, for instance, and wants a job, if they have those two things, then I can help them learn almost any technical skill. But you can't really teach a good work ethic, and you can't teach that drive to learn and to do better. So if somebody comes to me with those two things, I can teach them to do almost anything.
So, what are some of the projects that you're most proud of?
So we are, again, we're working on new stuff all the time. We're working on a massive curriculum project at the time that I'm very, very proud of. We can't talk a lot about it yet because it's not out, but it's going to impact, could be hundreds of thousands of children's lives. I'm very proud of kind of our initial flagship that we first created called Cubekins because it's being translated into multiple languages and being seen by millions, if not billions, of people all over the world. It was just recently translated into Russian, and it's in Farsi, and it's in Arabic and Turkish. And that's just amazing to know that something that we made, something that I wrote, is potentially impacting kids in Turkey, for the gospel. They're getting to hear about Jesus, and they might not ever even see a Bible. So that's pretty amazing as well. But I think one of the projects that we just recently released, because it's really in my wheelhouse, I love the kind of the older kids stuff. So the more kind of like anime, or the more kind of graphic novel esque entertainment is kind of where I reside. And we just finished up a show called Righteous Warriors. That's kind of like a Christian Kung Fu Panda, and it's all 2D. It's like the Tuttle Twins, hand drawn, and it's absolutely beautiful. It was a huge labor of love, and we're getting a lot of interest about that particular show at the moment. So I'm very, very proud of that, the team that worked on it.
So, do you ever put in all the work for a project and it just never airs?
Yes. As sad as that might be, yes. As a matter of fact, we have a story like that. We worked for over 3 years on a project that was a very, very large project. I can't talk about it because I'm under NDA, but all the work that we did, we can't show it, we can't talk about it. But if it were able to be released, it would be mind blowing. Probably everyone who's listening would know the property that we were working on. And it was a lot of work, and it's very, very beautiful. We're very proud of it, but we can't show it to anybody. So it's very sad.
So, what is the hardest part about being a chief creative officer?
The hardest part. I think the hardest part is when I don't get to bring that creation to its full completion. There are oftentimes where you start a project and perhaps it runs out of funding, or for whatever reason it never sees the light of day. And so, it's kind of like you've created this beautiful thing, and you want people to be impacted by it, and you want them to see it and enjoy it, but it's never able to get out of its infancy. It's never able to mature into what it should be. And that's really sad because there's lots of great stories, that people won't ever hear. But maybe one day something will change and we'll be able to produce those things.
Well, I noticed that you are listed as a Christian animation studio. Do you
Yes.
only work on God-centered material?
We try to only work on material that focuses on the gospel or Jesus or the Christian ethos. However, that's not always practical. And so what we have is a philosophy of, as long as it doesn't detract from God, or as long as it doesn't counteract what's in the Bible, then we're open to work on it. And a great example is last year, we did some work for the Maryland Department of Transportation. So obviously this was a commercial that we did, teaching people about a little Easy Pass, and we created a little animated character who's driving around the streets of Maryland. There's no Jesus in it, there's no gospel in it, but it was a fun little job, and the customer was really happy with it. So we can work on things that are not necessarily Christian.
So, how does animation make the world a better place?
I think it's because it's fun, and oftentimes animation can take a subject like driving around Maryland, that might be a little bit boring, right? And understanding that you have to pay a toll to go over a bridge, and it can make it more fun and more lighthearted. I think that's why people love cartoons. Is a lot of times you can deal with a problem or a topic that's very sensitive, but you can do it in a fun and colorful and entertaining way. And so that's why I think animation is so popular and why it has such a long shelf life. A lot of people still love watching those old Looney Tunes cartoons, and it's because they hold up well.
So, who can you say has helped or inspired you the most?
As a creative officer, wow, that's a good question. I would say this is going to be a really weird answer, but I'm going to head and throw it at you. Probably directors like M. Night Shyamalan or Mel Gibson, right? Because they are all about approaching storytelling in a different way. They approach stories and characters and conflicts with kind of what I would call a Dutch angle, right? To use a film term. A Dutch angle is when you have the camera and it just slightly off canted, right? It's just a little bit to the left, to the right. And so it's like looking at the world through a different perspective or a different lens that you don't normally engage with the world with. And I think for me personally, I bring that into almost every story that I write. I want to have something about the story that you don't expect as a reader or as a producer. And I want you to read that script or that story, and I want to kind of leap off the page at that moment, and you go, whoa, yeah, I didn't know this was about that. This is interesting. And so it engages you in a different way.
So what message do you want to tell children all over the world about being an animator?
Oh, wow. Man, you asked some hard questions, Tiberius. I think that number one, if you want to be an animator, you absolutely can. There has never been a time in history where it's easier to become an animator. I mean, you can literally, with your phone, you can start becoming an animator if you have a phone, or with a very, very low-end computer. There are amazing softwares out there. Some of them are absolutely free. The Unreal Engine is one. Blender is another, where you can start learning animation right in your living room. There are tons and tons of YouTube tutorials that teaches you everything you need to know. And I mean, literally, Tiberius, I have worked with guys that are in an apartment. There's 5 or 6 guys in an apartment, and they're living off of a generator, and they're animating, right? They're working and they're animating. So if they can do it, anybody can do it. So I encourage that if you want to do it, go get it, do it, because you can. It is possible.
Well, on that note, let's take a quick break to pay some bills.
The Tiberius Show would like to thank one of their dedicated sponsors, Custom Designs Orlando. These guys are on Mills Avenue and do all sorts of stuff, ranging from photo ID badges, engraved signs, custom braille ADA signs, vinyl lettering to trophies and awards. The cool part about Custom Designs is they can ship products all over the United States. You can reach them at 407-898-0373 and tell them that
Tiberius
sent you.
Over 40 years, Lighthouse Central Florida has provided education, independent life skills, and job training to thousands of Central Floridians who live with blindness or any degree of vision loss. Whether it's picking out clothes in the morning or just moving around your community and serving Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties, contact Lighthouse Central Florida at 407-898-2483 or visit them online at lighthousecfl.org.
And we are back here with Brandon Hollingsworth, a Chief Creative Officer at Brainy Pixel Productions. So, Brandon, what was that one thing that happened as a Chief Creative Officer that you did not expect?
The one thing that happened that I did not expect, that God would blow our business up. I mean, He's actually grown us tremendously over the past 5 years. Did not expect that. Couldn't have predicted it.
So, how long does it take to put on an average animation?
Could take upwards of 3 years. That's kind of a simple animated show. Yep.
Well, do you think AI has a positive role in animation, or are you worried that it might take over parts of a job and cost people a living?
I think it could have a positive role in animation. It's one of the things that we're working on here at Brainy Pixel. It could also cost people jobs, but that's any new tool.
Well, if you could go back in time and give your 13-year-old self advice, what would it be?
Learn a lot more.
Well, if you had to do a different job, what would it be?
Probably back into software design and development. That's what I did before I was a creative officer.
Well, what was the biggest mistake that you've ever made, and how did it change you as a person?
Oh, the biggest mistakes. I jumped off of a roof and broke my leg, and that taught me that time is precious.
Well, if you're a big video game person, you just gotta double jump at the end of it or just roll. So, what do you do for fun when you're not creating?
I like to write. Strangely enough, that's also my job and also my hobby. I like to hike and backpack and camp, and I love to cut wood with an axe and a splitter.
Well, speaking of video games, do you play video games? And if so, what is your favorite one?
That's a great question. I actually can't play video games because I'm very addicted to video games. I almost flunked out of college playing video games.
So, what's your favorite book to read then?
Probably The Lord of the Rings.
My man. Okay. Now, can you tell me that one story? Remember, this is a kid show. But that one story, well, that you're not supposed to tell me about. Come on, you can tell me.
The one story I'm not supposed to tell you about?
Nope.
I'm an open book, so I will tell you any story you want, Tiberius. So I'm not really sure that I can answer that question.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you think my listeners should know about you and what you do?
I would encourage them to come check us out at brainypixel.com and all of our social medias where we're either at Brainy Pixel or at Brainy Pixel Productions. We're very active on social media, and we would love to meet you and interact with you.
Well, what is that one question that you think I forgot to ask you?
How old do you have to be to get into animation?
Well, how old do you have to be?
We have people that are literally in high school working with us right now.
Huh. Well, thank you, Brandon, for being my special guest. Can you stick around for Math Corners?
Yeah, sure.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't play my games.
Call your computer solutions today, and we will scan for viruses and clean that computer up remotely and make it fast again. Our phone number is 407-826-0810.
Thanks, Dad. My computer's fast again. Now I can do my homework. Thanks for calling your computer solutions at 407-826-0810.
Tiberius' favorite subject, it's Math Corners!
Thank you so much, Brandon, for helping me with Math Corners. This week, we're just more multi-step word problems. My dad is always going to find any problems for me to solve. And today, we're going to talk about bouncing a ball. Well, Mark is creating an animation of a boy bouncing a ball to a friend. In order to make it more realistic, they have to adjust for gravity and reduce the height of the ball by 3/4 of its height for each bounce. If the ball is dropped from a height of 64 inches, how high will the ball bounce on the third bounce when it reaches his friend?
You realize math is my kryptonite, right, Tiberius?
I'll answer it for you. Well, first is a real-world problem because, well, animators do really want to make their animations feel lifelike, and the bouncing ball does get a reduction of height because of gravity, due to the Newton's laws of motion. So, to solve this problem, first you have to figure out the height after the first bounce. So, it starts with 64 inches, so you times that by 3/4. You get them 3 times 64 is 192 divided by 4 is 48 inches. Now, repeat that for the second bounce. So, 48 times 3 is 144 divided by 4 is 36. For the last bounce, it would be 3 times 36 is 108 and divided by 4, and you finally get 27 inches. It's a lot of dividing.
That's a lot of dividing with fractions.
So the animator will need to ensure the ball ends up at 27 inches when the friend catches it.
Oh, nice.
So,
hey,
Brandon, Do you have to plan out and storyboard for physics and gravity when you're making animations?
So it depends on the type of animation you're doing. If you're doing something called technical animation, then yeah, you absolutely have to do all the math and you have to make sure it's right because you're doing things like rocket simulations or particle simulations or things of that nature. And that's all very math based. But if you're doing something more, we'll say fun and more cartoony, then you use the math as a guide and you use the real world as a guide. But you're going to add a little what they call squash and stretch. And you're going to make it a little bit more comical. So you're probably going to make it a little bit smaller or a little bit larger, depending on the effect that you want that animation to have. So,
Well, my teacher said that I would use math every day. How do you use math with your work?
so on the 3D side, for sure, math is a huge part in understanding where you are in the 3D space, like as you're composing your scene. We worked on a show a few years ago where like the highest point in the show in the 3D space was a mountain that was like hundreds of miles high, but then also we had pits and things where the characters would go down like in mines. And we had to understand when we put a 3D character in that space where they were in relation to that high mountain and that low pit to make sure they were in the right place. And that took a lot of dividing.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for your help with Math Corners.
My pleasure. I don't think I helped much, but glad I was here.
And now it's time for the Heart of a Lion. As you know, we talk about the qualities of living by the heart of a lion, which stands for leadership, integrity, obedience, and nobility. This week, we're talking about integrity. For me, I think integrity is doing what is right even when no one else is looking. The qualities of integrity is honesty, sincerity, truthfulness, and fairness. Yesterday, I was at the park playing basketball with my friends when I saw something that really stuck with me. A little kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was riding a scooter when he accidentally dropped a $10 bill without noticing. But before I could say anything, another kid, probably around my age, saw the money on the ground. He ran to go pick it up. But instead of keeping it, he picked it up and ran after the little boy to give it back. The little boy's face lit up with surprise, and he said thank you in the happiest voice. It was just so cool to see someone do the right thing even when no one told him to. That's what I think integrity is. Doing the right thing even when no one else is watching. That is exactly what I would have done, and I was glad to see that others would do it as well. So, Brandon, did you see or use integrity at all this week?
I try to use integrity every week. Just with the walk that I have as a Christian, I try to be integritous in all of my dealings. And yeah, this week specifically, for instance, we had a guy working for us, and he completed his contract a little earlier than the contract said, and we actually went ahead and just paid him the full amount. Most people in business wouldn't do that. They would say, oh no, you want to wait and you want to do what the contract says and you want to actually wait for the 30-day terms or the 90-day terms or whatever. But we knew Christmas was coming up and this guy probably needed that money to give his family a nice Christmas. And
Yeah.
so we just went ahead and paid him because the work was done. Why wait? Right. And so treating people the way you want to be treated is a huge part of what we do here at Brainy.
Yeah. Well, of all of the Heart of a Lion virtues, which is the one that you see the most?
I think for me personally, it's probably leadership because, I am one of the leaders of the company. I lead several teams working on several different projects. And that's just a kind of part of my every moment, as a father and as a husband, as a leader in my church. And that's definitely one of the qualities that God has instilled in me is leadership.
Well, we should always try to be lion strong in everything we do, shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
And that's our show, folks. I want to thank the one, the only, the amazing Brandon Hollingsworth for being on my show. It has been so much fun talking to you today. I think we learned a lot about your career as a chief creative officer, not chef, and the world of animation.
Thank you so much, Tiberius, for having me on. It was a blast, and I can't wait for the next opportunity. So,
do you mind giving your social media and website again?
Sure. Yeah, would love to. So you can contact us at brainypixel.com. And then also on social media, we're on almost every platform on the planet. And you can find us at Brainy Pixel or at Brainy Pixel Productions. And definitely connect with us there.
Well, also, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tiberius Show. And I would like to thank WWPR 1490 AM, K1998, Soul Radio 24/7, Easyway TV, and all the other stations that air my show. Now, please be sure to visit The Tiberius Show on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Brandon, are you subscribed yet?
I am, yes.
Good. Dad, check on that. Oh, and please leave me a comment if you want to grow up and work in the animation industry. I answer all the comments myself. And also, be sure to see what's next week on The Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy. That's me, and that's a wrap.